The sun hung low over the dusty frontier town, casting long shadows across the wooden buildings and the frightened faces of the people who lived there. Sheriff Alden Crow sat tall on his black horse in the center of the square, his silver badge gleaming like a warning. Wealth had made him cruel, and power had made him careless. To him, the law was not a duty but a weapon, one he used to remind everyone who truly owned the town. No one dared to challenge him, especially not poor rancher Eli Mercer, whose land barely fed his family. That afternoon, Eli stood with his hat clenched in his trembling hands, accused of failing to pay an unfair tax the sheriff had invented overnight. The townsfolk gathered, whispering nervously, knowing what usually happened when Crow decided to make an example of someone. Instead of jail or the whip, the sheriff smiled, a slow and mocking grin that made the air feel colder. He announced that Eli's punishment would be a gift, something far more amusing than coins or cattle. From the courthouse doorway, 2 deputies rolled out a wheelchair. Sitting in it was a young woman with pale skin and dark, watchful eyes. Her legs lay still beneath a blanket, lifeless, as if forgotten by the world. Sheriff Crow laughed loudly and declared that this was his own daughter, Clara, a burden he no longer wished to keep. He called her useless, broken, and said that feeding her was a waste of good money. The crowd gasped, unsure whether to look away or speak, but fear sealed their mouths. As a cruel joke, Crow ordered Eli to take her to his ranch and care for her, saying it would be fair payment for his debt. Eli's heart sank. He was poor, already struggling to survive, and now he was being forced to carry the sheriff's shame. Yet when his eyes met Clara's, he didn't see weakness. He saw quiet awareness, sharp and unyielding, hidden behind silence. With no choice, Eli lifted her into his old wagon and left the square, under the sheriff's laughter. Dust rose behind them as the town faded into the distance. The road to the ranch was long and uneven, but Clara never complained. She simply watched the horizon, her gaze steady, thoughtful, as if measuring a future no one else could see. That night, as Eli prepared a simple meal and helped her settle into a small room, he noticed how carefully she observed everything: the tools on the wall, the land beyond the window, the tired lines on his face. When he spoke gently to her, she answered softly, with intelligence and clarity that surprised him. In that quiet moment, Eli realized the sheriff hadn't given him a burden at all. He had unknowingly handed him something far more powerful, something he himself had been too blind and cruel to value. Life on Eli Mercer's ranch moved at a brutal pace, ruled by dawn, dust, and exhaustion. The land was dry, the cattle thin, and every day felt like a fight against loss. At first, Clara remained quiet, watching from the porch or beside the corral as Eli worked himself to the bone. Many in the nearby settlements whispered that the rancher had been cursed, that taking in the sheriff's paralyzed daughter would ruin him completely. Yet Clara seemed untouched by their pity. Her eyes followed patterns others ignored: the wind across the grass, the way the cattle grazed unevenly, the waste in Eli's routines. One evening, as Eli complained aloud about another failed trade, Clara spoke with calm certainty. She pointed out that the buyers were cheating him, that his herd was being sold too young, and that his grazing land was being used all wrong. Surprised, Eli listened. The next day, he followed her advice, and for the first time in years, he didn't lose money. Slowly, conversation replaced silence. Clara revealed she had spent her childhood studying ledgers, maps, and law books while her father built his empire. From her chair, she had learned to see the world as a system, one that could be understood and outsmarted. As weeks passed, the ranch began to change. Cattle grew healthier, neighbors came seeking advice, and Eli's reputation improved. Clara guided him in fair negotiations and clever planning, turning scarcity into stability. Though she could not walk the land, she seemed to know it better than anyone. At night, she shared fragments of her past, her voice steady but heavy with truth. She spoke of the day she discovered her father's corruption, how he stole land, crushed families, and twisted the law. When she threatened to expose him, she fell down the courthouse steps. No witnesses, no justice, only silence and a wheelchair. Eli felt anger burn in his chest, but Clara showed no desire for revenge. She wanted something stronger, proof, truth, and dignity. Quietly, she began writing, organizing names, dates, and memories. Merchants who owed the sheriff favors started speaking more freely around the ranch. People trusted Clara because she listened, because she never spoke with cruelty. Without realizing it, the town began to shift its loyalty. Far away, Sheriff Crow heard unsettling rumors. The daughter he had discarded was making a name for herself. The rancher he humiliated was prospering. Each report felt like a thorn under his skin. The joke was no longer funny. The girl he had broken was standing taller than he ever expected, without taking a single step. The rumors reached Sheriff Alden Crow like poison carried on the wind. Slow at first, then impossible to ignore. His laughter turned bitter as reports confirmed that Eli Mercer's ranch was thriving, and that his discarded daughter was at the center of it all. Anger replaced arrogance. He could not allow the town to believe that the girl he had called useless now held influence. Power, once challenged, demanded a response. Crow sent his deputies to the ranch under the cover of authority, claiming he wanted his daughter returned. In truth, he wanted control restored. When the deputies arrived, they found something unexpected. Neighbors stood near the gates, arms crossed, faces firm. These were the same people who once lowered their eyes in fear. Now they refused to move. Clara sat among them, calm and composed, her presence commanding respect without a raised voice. She told the deputies that she would not return and that the ranch was her home by choice. The lawmen hesitated, sensing that force would ignite something they could not contain. Days later, Clara decided it was time to confront her past directly. She traveled back to town, not in secret, but in full daylight. The square was filled when she arrived. People gathered not out of fear, but curiosity and support. When Sheriff Crow stepped forward, his confidence faltered. His daughter met his gaze without anger, only truth. She spoke of the night she found his hidden ledgers, the bribes, the stolen land, the families destroyed. She described the courthouse steps, the fall, and the silence that followed. As she spoke, documents were passed through the crowd, records. Clara had collected piece by piece, with the help of merchants, ranchers, and former deputies tired of corruption. The weight of evidence crushed Crow's authority. Federal agents, already alerted by anonymous letters Clara had sent weeks earlier, stepped in and placed the sheriff under arrest. The badge that once symbolized fear was stripped away in front of everyone he had ruled. As Crow was led away, his wealth meaningless and his voice shaking, he looked back at his daughter. Regret finally broke through his pride. He whispered that giving her away had been his greatest mistake. Clara did not respond. She watched silently as the man who took her future lost his power. In that moment, justice did what revenge never could. It ended his reign without destroying her soul. The town felt different after Sheriff Crow was taken away, as if a heavy shadow had finally lifted from its streets. People walked more freely, spoke more openly, and for the first time in years, hope did not feel dangerous. Clara returned to Eli Mercer's ranch, not as a discarded burden, but as someone the town now quietly looked to for guidance. Though she still sat in her wheelchair, her presence carried an authority that no badge had ever earned. Eli watched her with pride as neighbors came seeking advice. Farmers asked how to protect their land. Merchants wanted fair systems for trade. And families who had once suffered in silence now spoke openly. Clara listened to every story with patience and care. She helped draft agreements, suggested honest leadership, and encouraged the town to choose cooperation over fear. Her mind, once ignored, became the foundation for rebuilding everything the sheriff had corrupted. The ranch flourished beyond survival. With careful planning and shared effort, it became a center of stability for the region. Eli officially named Clara co-owner, not out of charity, but respect. He often said that while the land gave them food, Clara gave them direction. She never claimed credit, never sought praise. Her satisfaction came from seeing others stand taller, knowing their lives were no longer controlled by cruelty. There were days when Clara sat alone, watching the fields stretch toward the horizon. She never pretended her loss did not hurt. She would never walk those fields, never run beside the cattle or feel the earth beneath her feet. Yet she had learned something deeper than movement. Strength, she realized, was not measured by what the body could do, but by what the spirit refused to surrender. News of her story spread beyond the town, carried by travelers and traders. People spoke of a wealthy sheriff who lost everything because he failed to see his daughter's worth, and of a poor rancher who became rich in honor by seeing what others ignored. Clara became a symbol, especially to those who had been dismissed or broken by power. She proved that being underestimated could be transformed into quiet dominance. In the end, Clara did not reclaim her past, but she shaped a future greater than the one stolen from her. The sheriff lost his gold, his status, and his legacy. Clara gained something far more lasting: respect, purpose, and a place where her voice mattered. And the town learned a lesson it would never forget. True wealth is not inherited, stolen, or enforced. It is earned by recognizing human potential before it is cast aside.